Dear brother and sister, the saints in Christ, welcome to a new episode. This is our second and the last episode regarding the book of Judith. In the previous episode, we, with the grace of God, we smashed 2 points. All the trials, like to say that Nebuchadnezzar is the king of Assyria, and also we covered also the contradictions in the lineage of Judith. In this episode, we'll cover some other points. All right. So this will be the third point. There is a guy named Eliakim, and he was mentioned as high priest. But the conclusion is there is a problem with this, because we could not, you will not find this name as one of the high priests. So this means that the story definitely also is not a real story. Number 4. What is the time that the story could took place, all these like this war and whatever? Number 1, Father Daoud Lamei says the story by itself could happen or could have happened any time between the Assyrian exile to the Babylonian exile, which means between 722 up to 586. And he says, but it was written in the 2nd century before Christ. This means, according to his claim, which is totally wrong, as we'll say, even with the other commentators now, this means that the writer or the author wrote the book between 350 to 500 years after the event itself. Oh my goodness. We'll see now that Father Tardross is totally against this. Number 2, Father Tardross Malachi says, some people say could be during the time of Sennacherib the Assyrian. Some says could be during the time of Manasseh the king. This is again about the 8th century or the 7th century before Christ. However, Father Tardross himself assures that mostly it is during the time of Hezekiah, the pious king. Again, we're talking about the 8th or the 7th century before Christ. But he assures that the writer is a contemporary of the event itself, because he says the way it is written, it is either the person himself or someone was listening to someone actually who attended the events. Compare this with Father Daoud Lamei, who said that it was written about 350 to 500 years after the event itself. Okay, now I've got a few comments here, please. Number 1, if the story happened during the Sennacherib the Assyrian, again we're talking about 8th century to 7th century before Christ, make it easier, at the time of Hezekiah the king, the good king, we could have seen his name mentioned in the book as a king, or also as a person to lead the army itself, but not the high priest and not Judith, even if the army was very weak. Number 3, who was in charge of leading a war? It should be the king, should be the chief army or someone from the army, but not the high priest. It is not his job. And how come the high priest is negotiating with a widow in a very difficult issue of war? So it looks like there is no king, there is no army at all, and there is no commander to the army. So he just the high priest is and even the high priest negotiating with should be with the Senate, with the Sanhedrin, but not just a widow. Unless he knows very well, yeah, it is a trial. She put her like sword in her palm, and she went like to seduce the chief of the army of the enemy, and that was actually her thought, and this is what happened. Number 4. Now, most of people said this event happened around the 8th or the 7th century before Christ, which means definitely before Ezra time, because Ezra in the 5th century. So this means we should have seen any, like even one verse in the canonical books, the 39 books that we do have in our hands now, even pointing to this event, not necessarily to mention the name of Judith or whatever, but just to mention like there was a war with whoever around that time of the king, whoever, and we won it, or the Lord saved us. No, you will not find. And number 5. Number 5, yes. If the story doesn't matter when it took place, but if the book was written after, like the 5th century, like as Father Daoud Lamei said when he said it was written 2nd century before Christ, this means even the story not mentioned in the 39 canonical books should have been mentioned in the Apocrypha historical books, like the books of Maccabees. You understand? If the story, if the event happened in the 8th or 7th century before Christ, this means it is before Ezra. So we should at least see even the event itself in any of the 39 books that we do have in our hands. If the war or the event happened after the time of Ezra, all right, we should see even not like in the historical books, even an indication, like the Maccabees, about this war. It doesn't have to be in detail, but no. So the conclusion is this event itself, this war itself, or whatever if you would like to call it, did not have any mentioning at all as an event, not in detail, neither in the 39 canonical books nor in the other non-canonical books or the Apocrypha books, not historical or non-historical. So the event is not mentioned there at all, and this will make a KO to this book very soon. All right. Also, by the way, the story itself even not mentioned in the most important historical book by Josephus, the Jewish guy who actually was in the 1st century. All right, we'll come to this in a bit more detail. So between the story happened up to the 1st century after Christ, there is no mentioning at all about this event. So it is not in the 8th century or 7th century before Christ, not the 4th century before Christ, not the 2nd century before Christ, even not the 1st century after Christ. So the whole thing is mess. It's a fairy tale story. Okay. Now come to the 5th point. By the way, I would like to put one more comment. By the way, where is in the book of Judith, where is the hand of God? By the way, what actually God did? In fact, they won, according to the story, the war by whatever I call, or whatever we know that those action movie or those spying movie or whatever. I'm not very clever in this. When you see a woman is using her female seduction to drag a man and eventually kill him. So actually this what this lady did, as we'll go a little bit in more detail later on. So actually she thought, yeah, they are in trouble, whatever, and she was very beautiful, as is mentioned, and she I don't know whether she wear or she did not wear something to drag the guy, and this is what happened actually, according to the story. Okay, now, who actually wrote the book itself? This is number 5. Saint Jerome thinks it's Judith itself or herself. Some other people say it's Joachim, the high priest. Some said could be Judith put the events, but someone else put it in the form of a story or a book. However, this is from Takla site, all what I read now. But anyway, they said definitely the writer should be contemporary to the event, because no one can mention all these details like this unless he was either in the event itself or he heard the events from someone who was like an eyewitness of it. All right. Now, come to the 6th point. What is the language of the book? Now we read from Saint Takla site. It says the book was written in Hebrew. Great, where it is? But the original was lost. It is a trick, is very known. All right. Like you remember, it is like what when after the resurrection, what happened? The Jews said to the soldiers, say that his disciples came while we were asleep and took his body. So if you were asleep, how did you know that the disciples took it? It is the same thing. They say, yeah, when they stuck on, it is lost. Lost? If it is lost, it is lost. And after that say, but there are 2 copies in Greek, and they have taken one of the Greek and they put it, translated into Hebrew, and say, this is now the original Hebrew. My goodness. And now it is expected that you say, okay, say amen on this. This is what can I say about this? It's all lying. It is all lying. It is lost. Then you write one in Greek, then they translate the Greek into the Hebrew, and they say, this is now the Hebrew one. If you understand? Anyway. So it is not true at all. It is all lies, and everyone is trying to save the face of the I'm saying face, F-A-C-E, the face of the Orthodox Church and the Catholic as well. And there are 2. We've seen the idea of a lost original, and there are 2 texts. One is longer than the other, only in all the attributed falsely books attributed to the apostles. Okay. 7th point, again from the side of Takla, why the Jews rejected the Book of Judith. So how come now Father Daoud Lamei says no, it is in the books, in the canonical books of the Jews. It's all mess, and as long as they contradict, means what? They all lying. Why? Everyone is trying to come with a new idea to save the face of the church. But the site continues, take into consideration that some of the old books were not found by Ezra during his collection. Now they put this statement because they might like to say the book was, because most of people say it was written before Ezra, because they would like to say now some books could be at the time of Ezra, but Ezra did not see them. So I would comment here, number 1, does this mean there is a chance that the 39 books that we have in our hands, there is something missing? Because you say that. Number 2, why don't you think it was during the time of Ezra, but Ezra saw it, but Ezra rejected it? Or why don't you put this this probability in your into consideration? Because this does not suit what you're looking for. All right. So you think it is could be during the time of Ezra, but Ezra didn't see it. No, could have seen it and he rejected it. But you would like now to convince me it was there, but Ezra didn't take it into consideration. Sorry, but it was there, but Ezra didn't see it, like it was missing, or he missed it. All right. Come to the next one. If you say that Ezra missed it, you'd like to say no, it was there, but Ezra missed it. How about, because again it's in the Tekla side, they say also it is rejected because it is not mentioned in the book of history by Josephus. So was missed by Ezra in the 5th century before Christ, and also missed by Josephus in the 1st century after Christ. You're talking about 500 years. So you must use your head, but this is what you are not interested in. Okay. I'll continue again, back again to Tekla site. It says in the introduction of the Book of Judith, which Saint Jerome, second half of the 4th century and the first quarter of the 5th century. All right. He says in Saint Jerome, in the introduction, his introduction to the Book of Judith, he said the book was not in the Holy Scriptures of the Jews. And he adds, and in the first Council of Nicaea, this is 4th century, the council approved the authenticity or the book as a canonical book. All right. I'm continuing still from the site of Tekla. Site of Tekla says, in fact, like in the minutes of the Council of Nicaea, we cannot find that the Book of Judith was mentioned there as a canonical book. This means what? Means Saint Jerome was lying. Either intentionally, or the books or the writing that or the resources that he had this. But in any case, if someone says that this book was like confirmed as a canonical book in the 4th century after Christ, in the Council of Nicaea, this is a lie. All right. Now, number 8. Now I got a knockout of the book from inside it, exactly like what happened with the Book of Tobit. You remember in the Book of Tobit, the last chapter in the Book of Tobit, there was a prophecy which we found that definitely is a lie. Now, again, in the Book of Judith, also in the last chapter, chapter 16, there is a KO there, because it says what in the book 16 verse 31. It says, but the day of the festivity of this victory, yes, is received by the Hebrews. This means the writer looks like he is not a Hebrew, because he says received by the Hebrews in the number of holy days, and is religiously observed by the Jews. Again, the writer looks like not like a Jew from that time until this day. However, my concern now, or the most important thing, he says now, after this victory, two things happened, or one thing happened, but I got two things. Number one, they considered it as a holiday, so they must give it a name, like the Purim during the time of Esther. And also, it says they consider it as a holiday and they celebrate it until now. So I don't know what they mean until now, like until what? It should be until today, if it is. So what is the date and what is the name of that feast? It is not mentioned. So this means what? Definitely it is a fairy tale. Compare this with the Purim, as I mentioned, and also with the Feast of Restoration in the Book of John. When there was a Feast of Restoration, it's a historical thing. This Feast of Restoration actually took place after the New Testament, because it happened like in the time between whatever we call the 400 years before, between Old Testament and the New Testament. It's called the period between the two testaments. So that's why it is not mentioned in the Old Testament, but mentioned in the New Testament. And in the New Testament, the source is the historical books of Maccabees. So we know the name, we know the time. But for this one, what is the name of this feast and what time is it? So definitely it's a fairy tale. All right. So we covered so far 7 points. So now the conclusion of all this history stuff that we read, like we covered last episode and this episode, the story is not mentioned. There is no mentioning about this story at all, neither in the canonical books, not the non-canonical books. All the trials that they to prove it is like a canonical book definitely are wrong and all lies, and even the contradiction between those people shows that they are lying. Especially we know that all these problems actually comes from with those they consider them Christians from a Gentile background, but never from Jewish background. The Jewish this is settled. It is just a book. It's a fairy tale. It's a myth. All right. In fact, the book was accredited or considered as whatever only in the 16th century, which is the Council of Trent, which actually was a counter-reformation council, and it has actually a political agenda against the Reformation, Reformation movement. And by the way, like Christians from Gentile background should not be worried or have a say regarding a totally Jewish book, especially the Old Testament ones. It is fully Jewish stuff. It is not your job. All right. But because out of these fairy tale books, as we'll see later, many heresies came out that they put in their own religion, whether it is the Catholic or the Orthodox. And we will come to this, by the way, all right? But later on. Okay. Now we come now to a very dirty game mentioned in the book, which is I would call like female seduction. Female seduction. That the lady put us like a plan, like to drag the chief of the army of the enemies, like into, I would say what? Into sexual stuff. Let's read now from Judith chapter 8. So know from experience, she's talking like a person with experience of God, that what I have intended to do is from God. It is a lie. Like we'll see now, God is not there, and she is going to totally rely on her beauty and her feminine skills in order to drag the guy to what understand. Now we know understand. And they pray so that God supports my advice, and I don't like you to examine my intention. But it was obvious because she, as we will see now. Anyway, and from now until I inform you of it, do nothing but pray on my behalf to the Lord our God. There is a Hegoman named Antonius Fikri. He says he comments on this and says, she didn't want to reveal her plan, otherwise they stop her. Her plan was very obvious, right? Because they said she was a widow, and since she became a widow, she clothed in black and sackcloth, and she was like devoted totally herself for prayers and like that. But when this happened, what happened? She took all these off. She put on her like the clothes of her wedding, and we'll see now some stuff, and she actually some perfumes, and she made herself like totally beautiful. And in the story itself, it says she was like the most beautiful lady in the Jewish community, like I can say Mrs. Jew, for example, if you can say that. And she went, and very obviously when they see her, that their mind will be taken into that type of thing. All right. Okay, now let's watch her plan by Father Tardross Yacoub, and come back again.
أصنع عملا عجيبا يشهد له العالم كله. قالوا هتعملي ايه؟ كم بشغلتكم؟ قالوا لها ربنا يكون معاكي. سابوها مشي. هي بعد ما كانت لابسه ثياب الترمل جابت ثوب العرس بتاعها، نزلت من العليه للقصر بتاعها ولبست الملابس الفخمه وتطيبت بأنواع من الأطياب أو الروائح الغالية جدا، وبقي منظرها يعني جذاب إلى أبعد الحدود. وبالفعل باختصار وصلت لغاية القائد، فتلموا الرجالة بتوعه قعدوا معاها، أخبروا أليفانا عن الموقف، فطلع بهر بجمالها جدا وبدت تتكلم بحكمة. أليفانا نده الخصي بتاعه اسمه بوغا، قال له الموقف ده وحش قوي. قال له ايه؟ قال له واحدة بالجمال ده كله وتبقى في ايدينا وانا ما اعاشرهاش، دي شتيمة ليا. هتقول عليا ايه؟ تقول عليا انا مش راجل او يعني انسان. فنعمل احتفال ضخم وايه وندهها لها ان انا عازمها، وبعد العزومة سيبوني اقعد انا معها عشان يبات معها. بالفعل راح قال لها أليفانا عزمك عمل وليمة. قالت يا وانا اطول ان انا اروح الوليمة وانا اطلع مين جنب سيدي أليفانا. فتزينت ولبست واتبهرجت، وبعد ما تزينت دخلت هي والوصيفة بتاعتها، وكانت هي اتفقت معاه ان ما تاكلش من الاكل بتاعه، دايما تاكل الاكل اللي جايباه. فلا طب لو خلص الاكل نعمل ايه؟ قالت له انا واثقه قبل ما يخلص الاكل ده هيكون دخلنا واستلمنا البلد. فكانت النتيجه انها قعدت فالتهبت الشهوه فيه جدا، فبدا يسكر هو والضباط اكثر من اي يوم. ولما جه الليل انسحبوا بقى وسابوه لوحده، كان هو من السكر الشديد نام مش قادر يقوم. فصلت لله واخدت الخنجر او السيف الصغير اللي معاه وضربت بكل عزمها ضربتين قطعت راسه.
Quickly he says that actually she put like a full makeup and perfume and she went to see the commander, the chief commander of the army, and he was like his mind was taken by her beauty, and he says, and she spoke to him wisely. I really wonder how come a person like that, and even speaking in this way like that, and he's no, what words of wisdom did she say? Actually, she was not talking to him he say wisely, not wisely, sexually, not wisely. She to drag him, and even says like his desire was like roused up when he saw her. All right. Now let's read part of her prayers. Bring to pass, O Lord, that his pride may be cut off with his own sword. Let him be caught in the net of his own eyes in my regard. You understand? Like, let him, when he sees me, like he fell in love with me, or in desire, or in lust, L-U-S-T. And do thus strike him by the graces of the words of my lip. You understand? The word is deception. Father Tardross says that it's words of deception. So can you pray to the Lord that I have I'm going to drag someone through his sex drive and bless this. It is the way that the people of God would do. Okay, now let's watch her prayer as Father Tardross mentioning or explaining.
نسيت اقول في كل الحركات دي هتلاقوا فيه كل شويه تصلي، حتى قالت له اقبل كلام الخداع اللي انا هقوله للاشوريين. يعني حتى الخداع بتاعها استخدمته وطلبت ان ربنا يشتغل حتى بالكلمات بتاعت الخداع.
So she's praying that the Lord will bless her, I would say, female seduction words with the man. All right. Now, if you come to chapter 12, you will find that the chief army named Holofernes, he put a plan, and he asked one of his soldiers a plan like a big feast and drinking and eating and all that stuff. And he said to one of his followers, like his soldiers, you will invite this Hebrew lady and because definitely I'll have a go with her. All right, understand of course what I'm saying. So the guy told her, you are invited to a very big feast tonight, where actually our chief commander and also the other officers and the people of the army will be attending all that stuff. Yeah, that's fine. But what she said actually, she said, wow, I'm actually at the disposal of the order of the chief commander, and whatever he wants, I'm ready for it, and all that stuff. And it says also, she, what is it? Okay. And she arose and dressed herself out with her garments, and going in, she stood before his face, and the heart of Holofernes, this is the chief commander, was smitten, for he was burning with the desires of her. So what did he see actually, this guy? Like a covered lady or a half naked lady? Now in the book of Judith chapter 16, they made like a doxology for that thing, and see what they say. For she put off her the garments of widowed, and put on her the garments of joy. It says like her wedding stuff, to give joy to the children of Israel. She anointed her face with ointment, and bound up her locks with a crown. She took a new robe to deceive him. So if a lady is putting on a robe to deceive a man, what do you reckon this robe would look like? Full cover, yeah, right? Listen to the next one. Her sandals ravaged his eyes. Do you reckon it is meant to be like sandals or something else? You got it, of course, right? Sandals. Okay, now I understand. So in actually, it's very obviously no God here. It is totally about her body. Her beauty made his soul her captive. So he was looking to what? Like a prostitute. With a sword she cut off his head. Do you reckon this is the way that the people of God will act? The plan is go and drag him through his desire. All right. Now, so we have finished the book of Judith. This is the book that they fight to consider it is a canonical book. So what do we learn from this? Yeah, when you get to a war, get Mrs. Or Miss whatever church, and let her to go and seduce the guy like to be a Christian. All right. Okay. Pray for our brothers and sisters that they still captives there. Pray for the channel, please. Subscribe to it if you haven't. Share the video with others. Give it a like if you think it's worth it. And unless the Lord comes, we'll meet again another episode. May the Lord bless you all. سلام المسيح يكون معكم.